Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution, sponsored by Jointflows. Today we're joined by Jack. Jack's got an amazing career. He's done some time at Salesloft, still there, and has worked his way through the ranks to most recently as a senior AE within there. Welcome to the podcast, Jack. How are you?
Thanks very much for having me on, Hitesh and Mick. I'm
Brilliant.
doing good.
Awesome. Anything you want to add to your introduction?
No, that's good with me.
All right, awesome. Well, let's get stuck straight into it. The conversation's always around revenue, and the challenges and successes that people are having through the landscape. So, good place to start really is if we think about the landscape currently, compare it to 6 months ago, 12 months ago, even 18 months ago. It's ever changing, and as a result of that, there are new challenges, there are new opportunities to exploit as well. It'd be good to get your opinion on how what kind of changes you're seeing within the environment and what kind of strategies you're putting in place to overcome these as well.
Yeah, we'll start there. The easy call outs to make are no one has as much pipeline anymore this year than they did do. And in those fewer opportunities, it's harder to sell the deal. And that's because organizations have a lot stricter budgets. Generally before, even at Salesloft, if I use that as a case study, I could get a CRO to sign a check. That doesn't normally happen anymore. And we would have to sell a business case to the CFO or CEO. And so you need to get that executive involved as soon as possible. If you can get your champion to bring it to them. The other thing I've noticed this year is, especially in the space that I'm in, everyone's doing the same play now, which is consolidating technology. So the competitive differentiation is getting tighter and tighter. And me and Mick sold into the same industry for a while. And I think now more than ever, it's becoming specifically selling to salespeople. Who does the buyer prefer more, literally as the sales rep, and who runs the better sales process? Like who's really clean, who's transparent, who can get metrics, who can implicate pain the most, who can manage stakeholders, who has who makes it easy to buy.
Yeah, removing frictions, exactly. You said something interesting there about getting the execs involved as well. And that's an interesting one. I've always found that through my career in sales, if you can get some kind of exec buy-in, exec alignment going on, multi-threading, it's always going to be beneficial. What are you doing in order to ensure that you're doing that? So I'd imagine that not all of your opportunities start with the EB, right? So you're going to have to work your way up. And as that old saying, it's easier to come down than it is to go up. So how are you working your way up?
I think with a lot of this scenarios, it's mapping out the deal. If you've got a big one at the start, who's in the org chart and how do we get there?
Yeah.
Testing your champion and coaching them how to buy the software. Hey, the stakeholders that I know and need to be involved are going to be someone in operations, someone in finance, and we're going to need an executive sponsor at the end to make sure that this gets signed off. Outside of that, I think a really easy way to the top is trying to do your background research on any customers that you have potentially in their industry, and most importantly, VCs as well. Like if you can somehow, luckily I work for, a company that's valued of $1 billion where we have lots of customers in the same VC portfolios. That's sometimes an easy way in to be like a draft on behalf from the VC into the senior exec. But also the same, making sure that your champion is happy with you doing your executive alignment. Someone that we spoke to before that's actually does this really well, her name is Laura. She works at Dream Data. She says that she will tell the champion or the coach that they're going to keep the execs up to date themselves. They'll be like, hey, I know that this person is going to be involved. I'm just going to keep them up to date in an email, via email or LinkedIn, meaning that when eventually we're going to be in front of them, we aren't together putting some business case that's fresh on that. Are you happy to do that? And I thought that was quite a nice soft touch without having to get execs involved or the VC.
Yeah, so setting the expectation up front, and that's what she's going to be doing. Yeah, that's a good one actually.
Yeah, a big fan here, Jack. As you know, I see a lot of things you do around Salesloft and around your sales processes, your communities you're building, your social selling, your brand building on LinkedIn. How do you manage your time around, across these channels, across these streams of activities?
Yeah, good question. I try and give myself 15 minutes every day to post something on LinkedIn. And honestly, the brand building over the past 4 years has grown quite naturally. It's nothing I set out to do. Like initially when I joined Salesloft, it's just been a natural thing that I think ultimately I really care about sales and I really like it as a profession, and I want to upskill myself and others around me. And so it really funnily came about, as you potentially follow on LinkedIn, Tom Boston, who was the other SDR when I joined Salesloft. And Tom, at the time in our first couple of months, was, hey, Jack, I don't know, this might sound really weird, but I'm thinking of like posting like a sales comedy video on LinkedIn. Like just thinking about like the nuances that we just have in sales about cold calling. And I was like, yeah, you go for that, mate. He posted it and he got like 50 likes, whatever, on the first one. And then it just spiraled into what he is now, which is he was an SDR and now he's like a brand awareness with tens of thousands of followers. And at the time I was thinking, maybe I should do sales comedy videos on LinkedIn, but like, that's not really me.
Yeah.
And mine was more, I was given an opportunity to go and talk at an event. And off that, it was like, how, in my experience, have I made myself a top SDR? What are the 3 things? And off the back of that, just that one initial talk, I had so many people go, oh my God, Jack, that was like, great. Thanks so much for sharing it. And then it just went on from there. And then we ended up building up, the communities, SDRs of London, because I think specifically in the junior sales role, everyone's so hungry to learn, and no one is arrogant as an SDR. Like you can't be really, like you're junior in your sales role. So everyone's so hungry to learn. And so it's the perfect community where everyone wants to meet up. Everyone wants to go to calls and make themselves a better sales rep. And then, yeah, that's gone on to the podcast and what else?
No, that's great. Like we are big fans here of paying forward and helping people out without, expecting anything in exchange. And I see you everywhere. So it's obviously also beneficial from a business viewpoint. You obviously end up getting some traction through your visibility.
And I think, a critical point is, Mick, that when you build your band, don't ever expect to get something out of it. And I think that's the reason why people follow you or buy into it, because all you do is give and give and give and give and give. But then when the time comes, when you do have something, people know who you are and they see you as a thought leader in the space. Like, oh yeah, hopefully people see me on LinkedIn and think, oh yeah, Jack Neicho, he likes sales, he knows what he's talking about. That's all that I can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. And just moving the conversation a little bit, and you were one of the early employees in Salesloft in EMEA. I believe you were employee number 3, right? Obviously it's grown considerable in that time as well. What kind of changes have you seen from I guess an organizational point of view, and how have you had to adapt? So, to give you some context, someone like me, I like working in more of a startup environment, where it's the analogies, you can just shoot from the hip, you don't have as many red lines to cross. And I've experienced both. I've worked in bigger companies and obviously smaller companies as well. And so I'd imagine you've seen somewhat of a transition. So talk a little bit about that and the kind of adjustments you've had to make as part of that.
That's good. And I don't think I've ever shared this before in a public format, but I'll tell you how I actually ended up getting into Salesloft.
Yeah.
It was because of my last company, Adthena. Our sales director was like looking into cadencing or sequencing type software. And he went into a room and he had his demo of Salesloft, and they were probably looking at outreach as well. And he came out of the room and he went, I have just seen the best piece of software I've ever seen. And this was 5 years ago, before cadences and sequences, they were ever a thing, people were just all doing it automatically. And we were like, what? It tells you to call next the next day, and makes it sync into Salesforce. And he was like, yeah. We were like, oh my God, that is the best thing I've ever heard. How has no one thought of that before? And all I remember doing is about a month after that, my colleague Chantal, who was the first person that they moved across from the US to the UK, she walked in, delivered champagne to Mark, who was my sales director. She was like, yeah, we're just opening up our UK office. And I was like, oh my God, or we're thinking about opening up in the UK office. And I was like, Googling careers they opened up. About 3 months before that, when he had that demo, I went and looked at if Salesloft and Outreach were hiring in the UK. Because like I was just so bought into this idea of this like mad product being now opened up in Europe. I was like, that's where I can make all my money.
Yeah.
Like I totally believe that that's the focus. And do you know what? Funnily enough, I probably in hindsight, whoever opened up their office first, Salesloft or Outreach, I would have been there. And it just so happened that Salesloft opened up their office first. And so I went gun-ho into joining this business. And I think in answer to your question, from being employee number 3 here, it's different because we were about 800 employees at the time. So there was already this juggernaut out in the States with loads of great processes, how you generate pipeline, how you formulate a deal, great tech stack. I was just had that and then had to go and create it or change it slightly to go and then enter a new European or EMEA market.
Yeah.
So I think the big thing was like we had the process and stuff behind that we needed to tweak because, you know, the language that you use to target America is very different. And it's like a lot of Americanisms that we wouldn't use to target UK or Germany or France. Everyone's a little bit more secular, but also we had this perfect opportunity to create like an amazing culture. And I've seen that scale and grow, and being the first SDR, now there's what, 30 AEs, like it's from where it is now 4 years later. So what it was, so different.
Yeah, I bet. And what motivated you then to make that change? Was it just simply the product? Was it money? What's driving you to make these changes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm lucky enough that my dad's in enterprise sales as well. He works at Bloomberg and has like a managed sales team. So I've got a really good father figure, but also someone that I can turn to for advice. And he probably gave me the best advice I've ever had as a sales rep. And I was an SDR for 2 years at this point. And we couldn't move up in Athena. Basically, a sales rep had to leave, and then it was all verticalized. So it was like someone's on retail, someone's on travel, and they didn't have enough market in the UK for them to go and get 2 reps on one vertical. So you basically just had to leave. Someone had to leave for you to get promoted.
Oh yeah.
And I was, and every other role at that 2-year mark I was interviewing for was for an AE. Every role. And Salesloft is the only one I was an SDR. And my dad, like, always gave me the advice. He was like, you'll be an AE, like if you stay at sales. And that's where you'll be probably for at least 10, 20 years, maybe even 40 years if you don't go up into sales management. The SDR part of your career is like the 100-meter sprint of what is your 10K career in sales. So he was like, don't just go somewhere because of a title. You've got to back a winning horse, and it's best to back a winning horse and start at the bottom and work your way up than it is to just go and work, I don't know, for some fintech business where you can just go and get an AE. And I'm so glad I took that advice and I actually did it, and then took a sidestep into an SDR at Salesloft, and it definitely helped me accelerate my career to what it is now, you know, back-to-back promotions year after year at Salesloft.
That's amazing. So obviously it's not all about the money for you then, is it? It's about backing the right horses, you said. So that's amazing.
And I think actually, Hitesh, the important part is backing the right horse is the money.
Yeah.
You know, so your career is 40 years. Let's say best case scenario, we get to retire at like in our mid 50s or 60. Like if you're a sales rep, junior sales rep starting at 21, 22, 23, that SDR role is like 2 years. Where can you go and maximize your potential is by backing a winning horse. And like, look at the guys that would have worked at, you know, Snowflake and whatever, like those massive, imagine if you got there and at like Series A, Series B and cashed out at Series A.
Yeah.
It's about backing the right horse in the right market at the right time, I think, is ultimately how you maximize your earning potential.
Absolutely.
Jack, you spoke about making it easy for your buyers to buy and essentially running the best sales process versus your competition. How do you do this?
Yeah, good question. every deal is different. Like we know that even from running the podcast in itself, but I think you can create some form of formulaic sales process, which, you know, makes it easy to buy from you. And that could involve trying to get the right information out at the right time as well. And that is going to be like discovery, demo, maybe a team demo after that, presenting the business case back and commercials, and then a decision call. And that's basically my spine. And then I can just add meat to the bones if and when I feel like I need it. Like if they're concerned around adoption, like you're going to pull in an onboarding consultant, or if they're concerned about this, you can bring in a customer reference. So I think you just get to test and learn over so many deals what works in some situations and what doesn't. Hopefully that answered your question in like an easy way possible.
Yeah. How much is, and maybe you don't want to give away your secrets, but how much of your sales process is you trying to push for your sales process versus you trying to figure out what the buying process is and align with it?
It's a really good question. I would say it's almost 50-50. Maybe it's like 55-45. I think you're always trying to, like, unless someone, let's say, Mick, I'm selling to you, and you can tell me, Jack, I have bought software. I bought 3 pieces of software at my company. This is how you buy software here. I'm going to go, nice one, mate. Reins over to you. I'm really happy to follow you. That's quite a rare circumstance in the commercial division that I work with. But in that scenario, I would very much be happy to be led by you and help you to buy along the way as soon as we were vendor of choice or before. I think in most scenarios, buyers haven't bought software at their company before, so they don't know what the internal buying process is. And your job is to try and make it as easy as possible to buy from you. So all we're really doing is collating the 100 deals we might have had. And in those 100 deals, let's say we have won 33% of them. When buyers have bought, what happened? Who was involved? You know, and you're advising them, like we said at the beginning of things, I know to get this deal across the line, if you want to buy it, we need to speak to sales operations. We need to present a business case to the CFO, which, you know, shows the return of investment, adoption, onboarding, etc. We need to show the onboarding to the sales team to show them what's going to happen over the next 8-week process.
Very good.
Yeah, and we're seeing in line with that obviously it's unanimously been said that sales cycles are getting longer and longer, as you would expect. What are you doing to tackle this? Are you doing anything to shorten it, or are you more saying, okay, this is the sales cycle, this is what it's going to be, now it's about planning and making sure I'm more predictable? What's your approach with this?
Yeah, great. I think the easiest way to get deal cycles quick is getting executive buy-in and a sponsor as early as possible.
Yeah.
I think the deals drag on when, one, execs aren't aware of a process, potentially. Like they haven't gone, hey, Hitesh, I want you to buy Cadence's software. Go and do it, you know, or you have built a business case with like maybe some like an SDR manager, and they take it to who you've told them needs to be involved, and they go, we've got no budget for this.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're having to sell again. That elongates the process. If you can get decision makers built in as quickly as possible, then you can have a faster deal process.
Yeah.
More and more buyers, as you probably know, are involved now. So many more buyers are involved. I think on average, like I used to have 3 last year. Now it's like well over 5.
Yeah, and you have to orchestrate.
There's
even on big deals. Let's say for me, a big deal in commercial would be anything that's 6 figures. If I don't have 10 stakeholders, I'm like, that's a red flag for me. 10.
Absolutely. And what do you do in that instance when you feel like you're underrepresented on the buying side? Are you proactively having that conversation and saying, hey, look, I know this is who you say needs to be involved, but actually, you know, what I typically see is you need X, Y, and Z involved over here as well.
Yeah, and I think the important bit is when you're going to your champion or deal or whoever your coach or the decision maker, come with the knowledge of who you think those people are and call out their names. So like go on LinkedIn and go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator and go, hey, I need to speak to Nick in sales operations, and I need to like, and then they can tell you, Nick doesn't do that kind of thing in sales operations. It's actually this person.
Yeah. Yeah. We're big fans of mapping out the org chart for any deal, really. And that, you know, that's the best way, right? So if you fail to prepare, you're prepared to fail, as they say.
100%. And I think there's a difference as well between having an org chart and having a power chart when you're selling like big deals as well. Because you might like, you know, you could have someone that's a sales director embedded in there. For example, let's say someone was going to come and sell to Salesloft. Albeit I have a senior AE title, I'm fairly well respected at Salesloft that if I maybe brought a deal forward, they'd likely listen to me or at least be an influencer. You know, people might not know that. Or even, let's say my sales director wanted to go and buy software and we had a team demo. If I then, after the team demo, going, no way, that is rubbish, you know, they haven't mapped out like that very small little power chart in our own organization. So I think it's good to differ between the two of them.
Yeah. Do you think there are any indicative insights that you can get from a LinkedIn profile that will indicate that this is a person of power? So, you know, for me, I look for obviously title, but tenure.
I think is the big one.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you look for?
Maybe responsibilities on face value. I suppose it's quite hard, but title, tenure. Yeah, you could even have people in like that don't have the title but have the tenure that are still more influential than potentially the people, because you don't know how close they are with the C-suite. You know, they might have built up their internal brand over whatever few year period. They might have their ear.
Yeah.
Jack, you spoke about consolidation and having a lot of businesses going through essentially trying to reduce the number of tools they use. In our experience, usually it's a massive red flag because we're an equipment software as opposed to a replacement software, at least to start with. And just anecdotally, we've gone through a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and the company we were pitching had 41 softwares enabled for the sales team. So there's obviously a cliff where you're actually over-equipped. Where do you see equipment being overkilled versus being underused? So how many tools should an AE have access to in order to be maximizing on their potential?
I mean, everyone's going to at least have a CRM, right? On a base level. You can have CRM, you can have your email, you're going to have, let's say, G Suite or Microsoft, whatever you're going to use to build presentations and stuff. Obviously, you're going to have LinkedIn. That at a pretty base level is like the least you could possibly have. And then you're likely going to add on that from a sales tech perspective, data probably comes first. So having like a Cognism or a Zoom info, then you're going to buy like a Salesloft or an Outreach. Then you're probably going to look at like at least some form of dialer if you haven't bought it out from there. So you can do sales cadencing, sequencing, and call from. Then on top of that, maybe conversational intelligence. And then, you know, we're already at like 8, and I wouldn't say that's a that advanced stack,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
and then we get onto something that you probably would then, you know, Jointflows then is how do we shorten the sales cycle? How do we increase win rates? And that comes with like better opportunity management. And
yeah, and then to this point, like when you build a business case that you present to your buyers, how much of this do you put into the business case, as in you enabling other technologies to your benefit?
yeah, it's a good question. Not necessarily enabling other techs, but quite an easy one to me is to put a monetary value on how much money they save by me replacing other softwares. That's the easiest one. It's like, okay, we replace that, your contract ends, and you know you pay that amount, that's the contract ends. So the consolidation players, okay, well, we can remove Gong or Chorus or whatever it is, and then that's how much money you save. I think a new play for us with the new product that we've just released is how much more adoption they'll get from other software with Rhythm.
Yeah. Do you see that this is the next next big thing?
It's how do we, with the other tools that you have in your tech stack in marketing and sales, how do we drive more adoption in those? So how do we shorten your sales tech stack, and how do we get more out of the other platforms?
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a question for you, Jack, because all the guests that we've had on, you're quite a unique position where, in terms of, I'm not going to name any names, but when you're pitching, you probably come up with a handful of competitors on a regular occurrence, right? Whereas, in other markets, you might have multiple players. So in terms of who you're actually competing against, that can vary in a great way. How do you differentiate yourself as a sales rep, not so much the product, but as a sales rep, to be able to win that deal? People say people buy people, right? And I feel, so I haven't sold in an environment where I would come up with a handful at a regular cadence. But if I did, I would imagine that it's me as an individual who would win the deal more often than not. So how are you separating yourself there?
Yeah, good question. I think the first one is just coming across like a consultant. So, you don't have your commission breath trying to sell your deal. You're trying to advise them. Luckily for me, I'm experienced in the space I am. So I could be like, hey, if I were you, I would actually do this.
Yeah.
And you know what? Quite a lot of the time, with most opportunities, you never really sell it on the first time round. It's normally the second op that end up opened. And if you've done a good process and they're like, oh, Jack, I don't know whether it's good timing, you're like, okay, great. If I were you, I would do this, and I would go and buy them, or I would go and look at this.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do as well, which is fairly well documented, and I talk about this a lot in A's of London, is like a way to come across consultative is by bringing competition into your deals. Okay. And I do this actively with my competition because it's a good test whether they're really going to buy software. So I don't know if Mick knows this, but like what I would do in my deals would be, hey, you've inbound requested a demo and Salesloft or my SDR has reached out, or I've reached out. If you're like really invested in buying this, you should go and look at Outreach or Gong or whatever it is, or Groove. They're really good for these reasons. We're really good for these. I just honestly think that simple approach makes you really believable. Like you as well, like I'm in their best interests. And I always say at the end of the day, whoever you choose out of us and Outreach is going to be a great decision. Like we're both billion-dollar software organizations with thousands of customers that both have very, very happy customers. And we've scaled and grown companies from Series A to Series G, whatever it is. Like whoever chooses is going to be the best for you. But along this process, we're going to find out, maybe if there's some nuances between the two companies where they're better aligned to get you to your goals.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think in your sector as well, it's kind of quite a red flag if it's not competitive as well, right? Then they're usually just information gathering. So yeah, great tactic. Okay, so we keep it relatively short over here. So appreciate you coming on. But before we let you go, we do ask one final question. Which we ask all of our guests. So in your whole amazing career you've had to date, I'm sure you have many further great years as well. But what's your greatest memory in sales?
Oh, nice. We asked this as well. I have two, if I can say these two memories.
Go for it. You got to pick one after you tell us both.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll tell you both. One of which was at my last company where I was an SDR at Athena, and it was like end of quarter, and we needed like a heroic amount of revenue to come in. Like no one had closed a 100K deal before, and we needed like 500K to come in. And one AE closed a 250K deal, and another one closed a like 150K deal, and then we had loads of other deals come in, and they gave us this massive like spiff where if we hit this crazy target, then they'd take us out for the whole night. And it was during like the World Cup, and it was England versus France, and we're all together. And I just remember even in that moment when those deals coming in, when like everyone was in the office, everyone was hugging, and I was like, this is the best job ever. And then we all got to go out and watch like England versus France, and as you can imagine, it was a fairly messy night. The other one was like, that was me looking up to the AEs that have done this like amazing thing, and they got us, and all of us SDRs got to go and join them, and it was such good camaraderie. The other was for me in my Q1 last year, where I closed like $500,000 in one quarter and pretty much did my whole annual in Q1. And we were waiting on the last day for my last deal, which was like over 100K to come in. And I can send you the video as well. Everyone was crowded around a computer that was just outside there in the office, and it came in, and yeah, don't think I made it much past 8 p.m. that night.
Those are the best. Well, I hope they put some
Yeah.
things in place for you to motivate you to keep going for the other 3 quarters in a year as well.
100%. Yeah. And the reason why I thought about those two is because I was like the junior sales rep idolizing what I thought, oh my God, these guys have done it and we all get to go out. And then it was like role reverse 3 years later where I got to have the same for the team. So it was like, nice.
Amazing. Which one's your favorite?
The one where I got to do it.
Amazing. Well, look, Jack, we appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. This has been the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Jointflows. Thank you again.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jack.